Welcome into the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Sunday, April 28th, and we're back talking recruiting. Spring games were this weekend. Oregon, Nebraska, and Colorado were the big ones. And also the transfer portal is just going crazy. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. We're going to have updates on all of it today on the Inside Scoop. So let's get to it. The entire country has been buzzing over the Colorado Buffs spring game, so I had to go directly to Boulder, Colorado to talk to somebody that was on the sidelines on Saturday. In this video, we got Jake Schwanitz from DNVR Buffs. We're going to break down the recruiting impact of Saturday's spring game out in Colorado. There's a lot of portal commitments over the weekend. Nikai Hill-Green committed. Colton and Brandon Hood. Flapjack Owens. Could be more on the way. I don't know. Hayes Fawcett just needs to stop tweeting graphics for a couple minutes so we can tape this. Colorado also picked up some high school commitments. Linebacker Montrez Walker and tight end Corbin Lashore. It's been a busy weekend. We're going to get into it, but first, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel. We're talking Colorado Buffs recruiting all offseason long. Jump on board, hit subscribe. All right, let's bring on Jake from DNVR Buffs. Now, Jake, I had to bring you in because you were down on the sidelines, and I'm just thinking what it's like to be a recruit at the Colorado spring game. Like, do you watch Deion Sanders and the X and O's? Do you look at the Hall of Famers, Warren Sapp and Deion Sanders coaching? Are you paying attention to Lil Wayne and Ryan Garcia? Like, what? I can't even imagine what it's like for an 18-year-old to visit Colorado for the spring game.
Man, it's absolutely electric out there. I mean, it was another year, kind of crappy weather, which sucks, but the vibes are just unstoppable in Colorado right now. You see, Coach Prime walking around. You see Shedeur walking around, going through pregame warmups with all these wide receivers. You see Warren Sapp on the sideline. All these guys are just blowing this thing up. Like you said, Ryan Garcia is there on the sideline hanging out with Bucky too. The cameras are everywhere. It's electric. Everyone wants to be there. Everyone's excited to be there. Even the weather couldn't keep down the excitement this season.
No, not at all. And, there was weather all across America, but Colorado still got the recruits on the sidelines, and that's what matters. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about transfers. Just generally speaking, there's a lot coming in, once again this offseason, flipping the roster, but who can you point to Colorado fans as a real difference maker that's coming in through the portal?
How much time you got, man?
I got time.
Let's start with LaJohntay Wester at wide receiver. Coming from FAU, Shedeur recruited him out of the portal last cycle, really wanted him. We've talked to him a lot about why he wanted him. He's just a vet, man. He's always in the right spot. He's a tough guy, going to be a slightly smaller build, but such a tough player, and he really balled out in that spring game. Preston Hodge at cornerback, too. He's going to be playing outside. It looks like Travis Hunter going to be playing more slot this season. So him and DJ McKinney, former Oklahoma State cornerback, on the outside. Coach Prime's been really talking up DJ McKinney. He said he sees first-round ability in him. So we'll see how he does as a starter on the outside this year. The trenches, too. I know everyone's going to ask about that, so let's get to him. Chidozie Nwankwo, former Houston defensive lineman, didn't participate in the spring game, but has been a real difference maker on that defensive line. Torian Carter in there from Arkansas as well. And then the offensive side of the ball, Justin Mayers at guard. He's really emerged as a leader all around for this team, has really grown. Strong relationship with Shedeur. That whole offensive line has so far. But Justin Mayers is the transfer who has come in and kind of led that charge on the offensive line.
Yeah, really exciting group coming in from the transfer portal. Now, there's also some big high school names on campus. I'm going to have Steve Wiltfong on this channel tomorrow. We're going to kind of dig in and get some intel on specific names. But when it comes to recruiting, just generally speaking, last year the big target on the board was Jordan Seaton. So I want to ask you, who is this year's Jordan Seaton, and why is it quarterback Julian Lewis?
It's Julian Lewis because he's Julian Lewis. He's kind of next. He's already been deemed as like the next great quarterback coming out of the high school ranks. I know he's only number 2 to Bryce Underwood, but there's a lot of buzz around Julian Lewis, and this program loves him. Finding Shedeur's replacement or successor is going to be the #1 objective moving forward for Coach Prime and the Buffs. They love Julian Lewis. I know he's very excited about the relationships he's built in Boulder. The relationship he's built with Shedeur also. So the way that things are being set up right now, they're bringing in a lot of guys with, 4, 3, 2 years of eligibility in the transfer portal on the offensive line, at wide receiver, all over the field. So they are really going to have to find a quarterback, and it sounds like Julian Lewis is the #1 target.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking Julian Lewis a little bit longer, kind of a slow burn on this recruitment. He has a late June official visit to Colorado, and I think that trip is going to be huge for his recruitment. So we just got a little bit longer to wait, but Julian Lewis already emerging as that guy on that Colorado recruiting board. Let's talk a little high school recruiting. Do you think that Prime's high school recruiting is going to go kind of the same as it did last year, or do you expect him to dig in a little bit more on the high school recruiting trail?
I really think they're going to keep going into the portal. They want to get these guys who, have already gone through the process. They're not going to have to go through the whole visit type of thing. Coach Prime loves the transfers because they can bring them in. They're all about business, and they're just ready to sign on the dotted line and get going. Mm-hmm. They have been attacking the 2025 recruiting class. They had a lot of guys in this last weekend at the spring game, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, skill players, secondary. So I think they're still going to keep it a rather small group, probably 10 to 15 if everything goes to plan in that recruiting class. But they want these older players who are ready to come in. I mean, that's the fastest way you can flip a roster in college football is the transfer portal. You don't have 2 to 3 years to wait for all these recruits to develop and come up through the program.
Yeah, and, hey, if you can flip a quarterback like a Julian Lewis in midsummer, that recruiting class could take a big jump from summer through fall just by having that one quarterback piece in place. So we'll see what happens there with Colorado. Jake, I want to ask you one more question. What's your biggest takeaway from this weekend?
Biggest takeaway from this weekend is we coming was a warning call, man. This team is just the momentum that they have on the recruiting trail in the transfer portal and what we're about to see on the field this season. This is just the start. A lot of people had jokes and laughs about 4-8. That was the first season. A lot much bigger things are coming to Boulder this fall and in the future. This is a program on the rise.
Yeah, Colorado fans, tap in below, comment section. How do you feel about the weekend? Any recruits that you really want? Let me know. Comment section below. Jake, appreciate you coming on the Inside Scoop, your debut here. Hope to have you on much more.
Yes, sir. We'll see you soon, Josh.
Thank you. Over 60,000 people were in Lincoln, Nebraska over the weekend for the Husker spring game. And there was also some top recruits, but the excitement got started early. Tight end Bear Tenney and Tanner Turch committed to start the weekend. And then Dylan Rhule did the rest. And it was an absolutely electric atmosphere all weekend long in Nebraska. We got Sean Callahan from Husker Online here to break it all down. But first, exciting times for Nebraska fans. Make sure you are locked in and subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel. We talk Husker recruiting all offseason. Hit subscribe. All right, let's bring on Sean Callahan from Husker Online. We'll start with a couple official visitors. Now, you guys did a great job. There was 8 official visitors. You guys covered it all on Husker Online. I think everybody should go check that out. But I want to highlight a couple, starting with 5-star athlete Michael Terry, who was on campus this weekend. We said that this was kind of like a foundational visit. When we talk 5-star Michael Terry, are we going to be talking Huskers moving forward?
Well, we haven't gotten, kind of a final update from him after the visit, but Texas is obviously a player with him being a local guy from San Antonio, but I think just getting him to Lincoln for such a big weekend, a spring game weekend with a great crowd, great weather, the performance put on by Dylan Rhule. There were a lot of things I think that got Michael Terry's attention. And one of the reasons why Matt Rhule wanted to have that spring game at 11 a.m. is he wanted to kind of start the day early with the recruits and then have the rest of the day Saturday to entertain recruits during the afternoon and the evening. So Michael Terry got as full of a weekend as you're going to get in Lincoln. And, for Nebraska, can they get him back again? And what kind of impact did this weekend have on him? I mean, that's the question we'll find out here, I'm sure, in the coming days.
Now, how about Cortez Mills? He comes all the way from Homestead, Florida, and there's been a lot of, chatter with Cortez Mills in Nebraska. This was now his time to take his official visit. What do you think about Cortez Mills as it pertains to Nebraska?
Yeah, I mean, Nebraska opened his eyes, there's no doubt. I mean, just getting him here, and I think you hear this from a lot of kids from Florida or California when they get to Lincoln. Usually it's not what they expect. They have an expectation of what they think Nebraska is going to be, and they leave with their eyes open. But I think what really helped Nebraska is Ja'Cory Barney is from his high school or same area, and they trained together. Ja'Cory Barney, as a true freshman, early enrollee, had an outstanding spring, made plays, had a almost near kickoff or touchdown in the spring game. So for a guy like Mills to see Ja'Cory Barney, somebody that he knows well, that still technically should still be in high school have an impact the way he did in the spring game, there's no doubt that opened his eyes.
Mm-hmm. All right, another big name was top 100 linebacker Dawson Merritt, the number 3 player in the state of Kansas. He took his official visit over the weekend. Now, if you look at the recruiting prediction machine, Nebraska trails Alabama by a good percentage. But how do you see this recruitment right now?
Look, with Dawson Merritt, I think just getting him back to Lincoln a second time in such a short period should get your attention. He visited Nebraska on the 13th of April for a Saturday practice, and he was back again on the 26th for the official visit weekend. So he has now made 3 visits to Nebraska, going back to last fall when he was here in September as well. He's been nowhere, at least on our database, tracking as many times as he's been to Nebraska. So they've done a good job of at least getting him here. And I think Nebraska's formula is getting a visitor here 2, 3, 4 times. And that is how they can get a guy committed. So I think it's a positive sign that he came back. The timeline now remains the question. I think with Dawson Merritt, he has talked about moving up the timeline of his recruiting process. What is that timeline now? And did the official visit weekend to Nebraska help expedite things with that timeline?
Now, one of these visitors that's been on campus a couple times is quarterback TJ Lateef, and we're kind of getting into that period where quarterbacks are coming off the board at a high rate right now, and it seems like TJ Lateef could be one of the next dominoes to fall. So what are you hearing coming out of this official visit?
Yeah, I think Nebraska's in a really good spot there. I mean, the competition seems to be more on the West Coast between the Arizona schools and Oregon State right now. Obviously, he's got some SEC attention from Georgia and Auburn, but Nebraska has identified Lateef as their top quarterback for a while now, and they've been on him for a while. They've let him know he's their priority. They've let him know he's the first quarterback they've brought in as an official visitor. I mean, early in the process, Alex Mansky from nearby Algona, Iowa, was kind of their top target. He committed to Iowa State. And then all their focus from there has shifted to Lateef, getting him here this weekend, watching young quarterbacks play well in that spring game. It had to leave a lasting impact, I would think, on TJ Lateef.
Yeah, and now one of these names that kind of flew under the radar for me, or maybe it was expected, but Ole Miss 4-star wide receiver commitment, Dylan Alford, showed up. And I don't know if this was a surprise visit or not, but as I said, he is committed to Ole Miss. However, rumors start swirling. Is there a chance that Nebraska could flip him?
There's always a lot of factors in there, in NIL and other things. I'm sure down the road will matter to a guy that's already committed to Ole Miss. But I think just getting him here had to get Ole Miss's attention, and Nebraska at least showed him right away, because the wide receiver group looked as good as any group for Nebraska in the spring game at times. And to have him here on campus, just to kind of witness the atmosphere, witness how those guys played, there's no doubt that left an impact. Now, will they get him back for an official? That will be what to watch. Will he and how did Ole Miss react of the news of him visiting Lincoln as a current commit?
All right. Just in general, how did Dylan Rhule, the performance that he put on, how did that help with recruiting over the weekend?
Well, it just really, when you have a quarterback that is a 5-star industry rated quarterback like Dylan Rhule is, and he goes out there and plays at that level, that gets everyone's attention. Yeah. He was absolutely flawless in the first half, 15 of 21, just dropped a ball in the bucket in the end zone, had a perfect deep ball on stride at Jalen Lloyd. His 2-point conversion throw, there were defenders all around there, and he put it through a window. He had multiple situational 3rd down, 2nd down, and long throws that he put in the window. So everything he put out there, going 15 of 21 for 239 yards with 2 touchdowns. He did have a pick, but the pick hit the receiver right in his numbers of his jersey and then bounced in the air as an interception. So you really can't be too critical of his one interception in the game. So there's a lot to build on. And I think if Rhule continues to play at this level and ultimately ends up being the guy and has a good year, that's going to help Nebraska recruiting. I just think his performance alone in the spring game helped Nebraska's recruiting, when players can see, wow, this is the quarterback I get to work with. And, he made players that really haven't done much in their careers at Nebraska look pretty good in the spring game on Saturday. And granted, it is a spring game, but you could, the timing and the execution of these throws, we just haven't been seeing that from Nebraska's quarterback play over the last few years.
Yeah, and, just from what he did during the spring game, kind of got Nebraska recruiting momentum rolling. If he can carry that into the fall, like you said, that's when it really matters. Nebraska recruiting is going to feel the impacts of Dylan Rhule having a successful freshman year. We'll see what happens. A lot to cover. You guys did a great job on Husker Online all weekend. You guys go check that out for more. Sean Callahan, appreciate you dropping by the Inside Scoop today.
Hey, Josh, no problem. Thank you.
The Oregon spring game was this weekend. Ducks fans showed up, and so did top recruits. That's why I got Justin Hopkins from Scoop Duck. He's going to take us behind the scenes of Oregon's big recruiting weekend. But first, Duck fans, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We're about 8 months in, and we're almost to 50K. You can help us get there. Hit subscribe. All right. Let's bring on Justin Hopkins from Scoop Duck, and you're going to give us the Oregon report from sunny California. It makes a ton of sense. So we're going to start with Nasir Wyatt because he's from Mater Dei High School right there in California. Justin, back in March, it seemed like Nasir Wyatt, now the rumors were kind of swirling a little bit underground, that Nasir Wyatt was almost ready to commit to Oregon. Of course, that never happened. Fast forward about 2 or 3 months, we're sitting here. Nasir Wyatt was just back on campus. What are you hearing about his recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, I know you and I have talked about him before, and I've talked about him on Scoop Duck. I think Oregon's been the team to beat. I know this weekend was a smashing success for the guys that were able to make it. As far as the group of people that showed up, I really genuinely feel like Wyatt is probably the most likely to commit. Again, we thought he was going to do that a couple months ago. He held off. I could see him making the call here within the next couple weeks, if not sooner. But we both know how recruiting goes and how fluid things are. So I think the Ducks are in a great position there. They definitely want him. He's a top priority. I think he comes off the board fairly soon. That's my prediction.
Yeah, like I said, it seemed like March it was going to happen, but now here we are almost into May. We'll see what shakes out from there. Let's stay right there in California, right where you're at, and we'll stay at Mater Dei High School because running back Jordan Davison was back on campus. Now, his recruitment has been trending heavily toward Ohio State. Texas now is picking up a little bit of market share in that RPM, and now he visits Oregon. So can Oregon get back in the recruitment and become a favorite for Jordan Davison? What's your read as he leaves Eugene?
That's the key here, right? Obviously, Oregon had the late coaching change, and it was at running back. So Carlos Loughlin goes to Ohio State. Obviously, he's immediately pouncing on Jordan Davison there. Rashad Samples comes in. I know they had a relationship, but he's really trying to build that at Oregon. Mm-hmm. And that's the key here. Unlike Wyatt, I don't think Oregon leads. I don't think they're the team to beat. I do agree with you. Ohio State, Texas, and others are up there ahead of Oregon. And I think this is kind of that first notch in the belt, if you will, to kind of get back into that top 3 range, maybe better. I know, it's great to have Wyatt around, and if he makes his commitment, that will have a little bit of impact there for Davidson, I would assume. So, yeah, I think right now, we've talked about this before, I think this is one where you're kind of chopping wood a little bit and really kind of building a foundation, kind of a new foundation, if you will, with the coaching change. And so, yeah, I think this was mostly about Rashad Samples getting a chance to, sit face-to-face and get to talk with him and spend some time with him.
Yeah, I think must get to get the 2 Mater Dei teammates back on campus if you're going to have a shot with them long term. Now it's switched to 5-star defensive lineman Elijah Griffin. I know Duck fans want to hear an update on this one. He comes from the state of Georgia. Dan Lanning going into the Southeast, trying to pluck one of the best defensive linemen in America. Elijah Griffin, what are you hearing after this visit?
I think he's going to commit tomorrow. No, just kidding. We got a ways to go here with Griffin. He certainly seems like a guy that wants to take his time. And currently, Oregon doesn't have an official visit lined up with him. So I think that's what this visit was about, really. If you can get an official visit with Elijah Griffin in June or in the fall, then this visit was a success. And we saw the pictures of Oregon spring game, pretty loaded, somewhere between 35 and 40,000 people in the stadium. Great environment, great atmosphere. So those are all the things that you're selling to Griffin that, hey, we've got kind of an SEC feel out here as well in Eugene, which isn't common for the West Coast. And so, yeah, again, Oregon just trying to stay inside that top 5, maybe push up a spot or 2. And ultimately, your key here is getting him back on campus for an official visit.
Yeah. Now, one prospect that the Ducks are not selling anymore, and that's wide receiver Dallas Wilson, because he's been committed to Oregon for nearly a year. Now, he's very talented out of the Tampa Bay area. Actually, he plays at Tampa Bay Tech, the same high school that produced Michael Penix. So if anybody's familiar with the West Coast, it is Tampa Bay Tech. Now, Dallas Wilson was back in Eugene. He's highly coveted. He's been taking some trips. The in-state schools are all over him. Justin Hopkins, what are we hearing? Flipper stick. And I don't mean like today he's not going to flip or stick, but long term, do you feel good about where Dallas Wilson sits with the Ducks commitment?
I do feel good about it. I'd feel great about it if he went to modern day, but he doesn't. But I that's the key there, right? The distance. Will that become, to me, having done this for 15 plus years, you and I both know the game. Distance isn't a factor until it is, right? And what I mean by that is you get 24 hours a week out from signing day or whenever you want to sign. And all of a sudden, mom's talking about how she's going to miss you and you're not going to see your grandparents for 6 months and they won't get to watch you play. And so right now, I think Oregon's in a pretty good spot to hold on to Dallas Wilson. I think Junior Adams has done a tremendous job building that relationship. I know Rashad Samples is definitely helping there and that hire. But again, to me, this one comes down maybe, towards closer to signing day and that distance factor and how much does that creep into his mind? Because you have to remember, this is basically like an old USC kid that basically USC used to offer you and you committed like that. And that's what happened here with Dallas Wilson in Oregon. And so it'll be interesting to see if he still feels that same way when it's time to put pen to paper.
Yeah, hey, they can't all be Jordan Scott, pledge early, stick to that commitment, have a great career at Oregon. But if Dallas Wilson wants to look at somebody in that area, Jordan Scott did do it. All right. Any other topics you want to hit on? Any other recruits that we need to know about before I let you go?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting weekend. DJ Pickett was supposed to make it and ended up not being able to make it. So that's one to kind of track for Oregon fans. The same with Tony Cumberland, 5-star defensive lineman out of the 26 class, just unfortunately didn't make it this weekend. But a couple guys that did make it real quick, 4-star tight end Lincoln Cure. Again, been to Oregon several times. It really looks like it's Oregon versus Kansas State. I could see him being a decision guy in the next, 2 to 3 weeks potentially. And I think Oregon is probably a little bit better off than most people think in that recruitment. So it'll be interesting. And then 4-star running back / athlete Dyer Hill. Oregon has always really liked him. Just a dynamic athlete, a guy that you can kind of put in the slot, can be a running back, move around, just a real spark plug on offense. Again, been to Oregon before, but that was with Carlos Laughlin as the assistant coach, running backs coach. Now he's here to meet Coach Samples. And, that's a guy that Oregon really likes along with Jordan Davison. So those are a couple of the other main hitters along with the guys you and I talked about.
All right, Oregon fans, tap in below, description, comment. Let me know, how do you guys feel about the Oregon spring game? Was it a success? How many of these guys do you think the Ducks ultimately land? Let me know, comment section below. It's been a busy day in the transfer portal. A little Sunday fun day, if you will. Colorado and Miami, they're the big winners so far, at least in terms of commitments. But I got On3 portal expert Pete Nakos in this video to hit on some of the most important recruitments that are still going on. But first, guys, hit subscribe. We're almost to 50K. We need your help to get there. All right, let's bring on 3's Pete Nakos, and we'll start with Dylan Edwards. He just came off the board moments ago to Kansas State. Now, what's the impact of that, and why do you think he ended up at KSU?
Dylan Edwards' father played at Kansas State. Dylan Edwards was a Kansas State commit for a little bit in his high school recruitment. I view this as a no-brainer, right? He goes in the transfer portal. He's very familiar with the coaching staff and obviously Manhattan, Kansas, and he gets on campus this weekend. And he's been best friends with Avery Johnson for so long, and now he's going to be in the backfield with Avery, and it just makes a lot of sense. In terms of the impact, though, I mean, Josh, not telling you anything you don't know here, but we're going to go to a 12-team playoff. The Big 12 is going to get a little bit bigger, but I think that Kansas State has a legitimate shot to compete for a Big 12 title now, and maybe even do some more stuff. And it's really important to look at, too. I mean, Edwards and Johnson, I mean, those guys are young guys. Like, they're going to have at least 2 more seasons before they're draft eligible.
I know. Really exciting times out there in Manhattan, Kansas. I want to talk a little Cormani McClain because it has been eerily quiet on the Cormani McClain front. Now, is it just quiet, or am I missing something? There's a lot going on behind the scenes. Pete, what's going on with Cormani McClain?
It has been quiet. I have made some efforts to try to track down if he's had any visits, and he did not go anywhere this weekend, from my understanding, unless it's been really kept on the DL. But I know USC came up at the beginning. I know USC is kind of out on Cormani McClain now. Every day seems to be something new with like UCF and USF. One day they're in, one day they're out, one day they don't think they can get him. So I think those are just going to be two schools you have to keep an eye on through this whole thing. And then on 3, Steve Wiltfong found out that maybe Utah was going to be maybe a place to keep an eye on. If you remember, Cormani McClain actually had BYU in his top 5. So I think he kind of likes that part of the country from my understanding. But Utah doesn't have an open scholarship right now. Like, I just don't – I think that Cormani McClain is an extremely talented defensive back with so much upside. I just don't think he has found a place just yet where he feels like he can go.
And so far, none of the big dogs are calling. We're not hearing from Florida. We're not hearing from Miami, Auburn, Texas. Nobody like that.
I have not heard any of that. No.
Really interesting. So is there a timetable right now for Cormani McClain to make a decision?
I think we have to officially throw out timetables, right? Like, you look at it. I know a lot of athletes like to take visits right after they go in the portal and make a decision. You want to look big picture here, though, right? Like, no athlete has to make a commitment inside this 15-day window in the spring, and beyond that, as long as they're enrolled in fall classes, I don't really think there's like a limit decision maker, unless most athletes want to get on campus for the summer, but you could drag it out a little bit. So This is going to be one to watch. I kind of get the feeling that we're not going to get like an announcement on like this week. That's just my vibe at the moment. Right. Obviously things change. But I have a feeling that this is going to be something we're going to be watching for a little bit.
All right. It only takes one. We'll see what happens there. Now, Tyler Barron, the edge linebacker, was at Miami over the weekend. Miami is pulling in a huge spring transfer haul. Is Tyler Barron expected to be part of that?
Yeah, so I talked to a source in Coral Gables today, and Tyler Barron was supposed to be on campus for the rest of the day. So I think he's wrapping up about now, give or take. I think the Hurricanes really thought that the visit went extremely well, to be honest with you. I think that Miami checks off a lot of boxes for him. Now, all things said, he has a stepbrother, Wesley Walker, who's also in the portal. Those two are kind of going to be a tandem. Like, if Wesley Walker takes a visit, I think that school then becomes a school to watch for Tyler Barron. So I don't want to say Miami's like the leader or anything. They obviously landed the first visit. I think Ole Miss is going to at least be something we have to keep an eye on. Obviously, he's transferring out of Louisville, but he initially committed to Ole Miss out of Tennessee. I've had a lot of mixed signals down there. I don't think that they're all in just yet on Tyler Barron, but I think that they know how much upside he brings and what he could do to a defensive line.
All right. Another big-time prospect that was at Miami over the weekend was Houston wide receiver Sam Brown. Now, there's some rumors that he might be ready to make a decision here soon. What are you hearing about Sam Brown?
Yeah, I logged a prediction and the On3 recruiting prediction machine earlier today for Sam Brown to become a Hurricane. Have had some conversations, feel really good about that. He obviously has also taken a visit to Texas A&M, and wide receiver is a position that A&M really needs right now, especially after losing out on Keandre Lambert-Smith. But I really see this trending toward Miami. He spent the whole weekend down there, and in terms of Texas A&M fans, I think the next spot you have to start looking at is the Auburn wide receiver Javarius Johnson.
All right, so Miami's weekend could continue. We'll see what happens there. Now, let's stay in the state of Florida. Jason Zandamela, originally from Clearwater, Florida, signed with USC in the 2024 cycle, spent all of 3 or 4 weeks on campus, and decided he needs to hit the transfer portal. So Jason Zandamela, what's it coming down to? It sounds like he could be nearing a decision as well.
Yeah, it sounds like he could be nearing a decision. I have not logged a prediction yet. I haven't heard one way or the other. I know there's a lot of momentum around Florida. He's been to UCF. He spent the weekend at Florida. I like the Gators right now, but I have not heard any indication it's a done deal. But on the flip side of all this, he's kept this extremely quiet. And obviously the one key factor in this recruitment is he wants to be closer to home.
All right, but does it feel like it's trending to Florida, or do you think like he might take a couple more visits after he just went to UCF and UF?
I think it's definitely trending to Florida. I know Florida State had made some contact, but I think the Gators have done a lot of homework throughout his recruitment and now obviously. And I think the Gators are in a good spot.
All right, we'll see if they can close on him coming off this weekend visit. Now let's hit on a pair of defensive linemen, quality defensive linemen that are both leaving Michigan State. That's Simeon Barrett Jr. and Derek Harmon. Where were they this weekend?
Yeah, so Derek Harmon spent some time at USC in Colorado this weekend, and then he's expected to get to Miami early next week, I think Monday or Tuesday. And he's a guy that's really interesting because he went in the wintertime. So while you hear those three schools, you immediately think, oh, those are the only three to watch. But he also took visits to Ohio State and Oregon in the winter, and I think that they're going to continue to be a factor, and he's obviously been on campus there. So he's going to actually be on campus this week with the other Michigan State defense lineman. You mentioned Derek Harmon. Derek graduated from college on Friday. He didn't go anywhere this weekend. He was in East Lansing, but he's already taken visits to LSU and Missouri. And he's also supposed to be at Miami early next week. And I've heard Texas is really pushing to get a visit as well.
All right, the last name I want to talk to you about is South Alabama linebacker Khalil Jacobs. His recruitment has been heating up. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Khalil Jacobs, another really interesting name who actually went in the portal after South Alabama head coach Kane Womack took that Alabama defensive coordinator job in January. Part of that Nick Saban domino effect. Khalil decided to withdraw. He's gone through winter workouts and spring ball, and now he's back in the portal. He's got 2 years of eligibility remaining and have had some good conversations with him. And he's going to take a visit to Auburn on Tuesday, Missouri Thursday, and then tapped off by a visit to Tuscaloosa on Friday to reconnect with his old head coach. I have to like Alabama here. Alabama was like the one to watch this past winter when he went in, and now he's back in.
All right. So the last thing I want to know is this the final group that we're going to see? We just saw a couple more spring games end over the weekend. There were some rumors that we might see some more guys fly into the portal. So far, no big names in the portal just yet. But do you think this week we see another surge?
Yeah, I mean, I think tomorrow is going to be pretty crazy. Not crazy in terms of like talent, but I think that there will be quite a few entries tomorrow. And the last day for athletes to file paperwork is Tuesday.
Yeah.
But I mean, compliance departments have 48 hours. So for all we know, we could see a really interesting name jump in Thursday at 11 a.m.
Pete, just for clarification, people watching, the players have to insert their name in the portal by Tuesday, but they don't necessarily have to make their decision by Tuesday, correct?
Correct. And that's end of day Tuesday. That's like 11:59. That isn't first thing Tuesday. So they have the full day. They don't have to make the decision by then. And then the one wrinkle, too, that we should mention, Josh, is with the new legislation passed by the NCAA regarding the transfer portal, grad transfers are actually going to have to go in by end of day Tuesday as well. In the past, grad transfers could go in with whenever, but that has since changed. Yep.
All right. Hey, Pete, another big week on tap. Appreciate you dropping by the Inside Scoop today.
You bet. Thanks so much, Josh.
Well, you've made it to the end of today's video, but there's hundreds more videos on the On3 Recruits channel for you to check out. And also, while you're here, hit subscribe.